Hey guys, in this video I am going to teach you how to simplify radicals. This video will focus only on simplifying radicals where there are no variables. So on page 25 of your notebook, if you look up at the top of the page, it has the 3 steps that you need to follow in order to simplify radicals. First, you got to find the biggest perfect square that is a factor of the number underneath the square root. So that goes back to this chart here that's on page 24 of your notebook. We're going to be using these perfect squares to figure out which one goes into the radical. Once we do that, we're going to use the perfect square and the factor that goes with it to write the radical as a product of those 2 factors. After that, we're going to simplify. If there's a number in front of the radical, you must make sure to multiply it by the root that you take out of the radical. So let's take a look at how that works. So if I have the square root of 28, I'm going to take a look at my perfect squares chart. The biggest perfect square that's less than 28 is 25. So let's see if 25 goes into 28. So I'm just going to take my calculator and do 28 divided by 25. That is not a whole number. Now I'm going to try 16. 28 divided by 16 is also not a whole number. Then we're going to try 9. 28 divided by 9 is also not a whole number. So how about 4? 28 divided by 4 is 7. So that's the number that I'm going to use. The perfect square is 4 and the other factor is 7. So step 2 was to take this and split it into 2 factors. The square root of 4, which was the perfect square that went into it, and the square root of 7. And the reason I can do this is because 4 times 7 is still 28. I haven't changed the value of this radical here. I've just split it into 2 and made it less simple. Now the square root of 4 is 2, so that changes to a 2. And then the square root of 7 stays the same. Now you know that a radical is in simplest form when the radicand has no perfect squares other than 1 that are a factor of it. Well, 7 only has 2 factors. It's 1 and 7. 1 is a perfect square, but it won't simplify any further if we do that. So it just stays the same, and that is your answer. All right, let's try 98. The biggest perfect square that is less than 98 is 81, so that's where we're going to start on our perfect squares chart. So 98 divided by 81, not a perfect square. 64 doesn't work, but 49 does. So 49 times 2 gives me 98. So those are the 2 numbers I'm going to split this up with. So radical 49, radical 2, and then the square root of 49 is 7. So 7 radical 2 is my answer. All right, next one, 54. I'm going to start at 49 on my perfect squares chart, and I'm going to start dividing until I get a whole number. All right, 16 is the winner. So square root 16, square root 4. Oh, I put the wrong number in. That's not right. 54 divided by 16 actually doesn't work. So let's go back and try 9. 9 is the right one. So square root 9, square root 6. 9 times 6 is 54. The square root of 9 is 3, and then we have radical 6. Okay, moving on up. 180 has a lot of perfect squares that go into it. So we're going to start right here. And I'm just going to divide. All right, 36 and 5 works. So this splits up into radical 36 and radical 5, which gives me 6 radical 5. All right. The next one is the first one that has a number out in front here, so you'll see what you have to do with that when we get to it. The square root of 40, I know that the biggest perfect square that goes into that is 4. So square root 4, square root 10, and this 3 is still out in front. Now, a number in front of a radical still means multiplication. So when I take the square root of 4, that's going to get multiplied by the 3. So that's going to become 3 times 2, because the square root of 4 is 2. radical 10. 3 times 2 is 6. Radical 10 would be my final answer. All right, from here on out, I'm just going to tell you what the perfect square is that goes into the number. 100 goes into 300. So 100 radical 3. The square root of 100 is 10. And then radical 3. All right, the biggest perfect square that goes into 20 is 4. So that's radical 4, radical 5 with a 7 in front. Square root of 4 is 2, so that gives me 7 times 2, radical 5. 7 times 2 is 14, radical 5 at the end. All right, now the square root of 15 is a tricky one. So if I go to my perfect squares chart, the biggest perfect square that is less than 15 is 9. But 15 is not divisible by 9, and 15 is also not divisible by 4. When this happens and you can't find a perfect square that goes into the number, that means that this number is already as simplified as it will get, so it just stays the same. Now this won't happen very often. We won't do that to you, but it's important to know that it can happen. All right, then the last one is the square root of 112. I don't know that one off the top of my head, so let's go ahead and do some division. It's not going to be divisible by 100. All right, it's 16 and 7. So this is going to become radical 16, radical 7 with a 5 out in front, which becomes 5 times 4 because the square root of 16 is 4. Radical 7, 5 times 4 is 20, so you get 20, radical 7. And that's it. That's how you simplify radicals that don't have variables.